Hello and welcome to the Alpha Anywhere Demo and Q&A webcast. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Products here at Alpha Software, and I'm pleased to be joined today by Dion McCormick, no relation, our lead solutions engineer, as well as Sarah Mitchell, who's in charge of our documentation department. Today will mostly be a Q&A session, although there's a little bit of a demo here at the beginning. So it's time to get your questions ready and typed into the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel. Also keep in mind, you can always reach us by email by sending an email to guides, G-U-I-D-E-S, at alphasoftware.com. So let's get started. Hello, Dion, are you there?
Yes, sir. How you hear me in okay?
I sure am. Go ahead and make you the presenter. Oh, looks like you already are.
I know. There we go. Wow.
Here's your screen. Super.
Thank you so much, Dave. Thank you so much, Sarah. Really appreciate everybody taking time out of their valuable summer schedule. Summer has started. I'm sure everybody's on the road, and we really do appreciate you taking the time to visit with us. Do me a favor, and if you do have any questions, please make sure to go to your questions area of your GoToWebinar control panel. Put in your questions there. We'll do our best to answer those during our session today. And if we don't, we will follow up and make sure we try to get as much information to you as possible. Again, your questions help drive our overall sessions, and we really enjoy hearing from you. And also remember, you can send questions to guides at alphasoftware.com. That's G-U-I-D-E-S at alphasoftware.com. And we will use that. That is great information for us to kind of find out what people are looking for, what kind of content they would like to see. If you have ideas for webinars, let us know, along with also any questions you have from there, and we'll go from there. Actually, one of the questions that came in recently is kind of driving a little bit of the content I have today, so I'll be showing that in a few minutes here. So before I get too detailed into that part, just want to remind everybody that the DevCon is around the corner. Let's see, July, August, September, few months away. And so we're very quickly putting together all the content for there, and we'd love to have you join us there. The sooner you sign up, the better the price is. And
the price has just gone up, but only by $49. So it's now $3.99, which is still a great deal. The full price is $7.99. That's what we will be charging if you sign up in October. So save yourself some money. It moves up every month. So you have until, I guess, the end of July for this month.
Yep, and I'm going to go ahead and put in the chat window the sign up location. It's a phenomenal event. One thing that's very important is that even though it's an online event, and it's possible you won't be able to make all the sessions, but all of them will be recorded in high definition and will be available to you, so you can review them at your leisure. So you don't have to worry about sitting in the chair for 8 hours or so. You can do that from there, and that's all part of the program and the plan from there. So jump on over. We'd love to have you join us. And with that, I'm going to pop over and talk a little bit about actually a subject I want to follow up on. A couple weeks ago, we did a quick series on SQL, specifically talking about how Alpha handles SQL, the concept of portable SQL, of native SQL, how Alpha handles all the details for you, so you can have multiple different basically databases and be able to interact with them without having to go through a lot of complex setup and other pieces there. We also talked about some of the built-in SQL tools that allow you to inspect, to write queries, to do all these number of really nice things, and put those together. And one that I think is really, really powerful is the XBasic Actions Genie, which helps write code to make it easy for you to extract data from those systems, especially like if you're grabbing data to put in JSON, to put in a view box, or some other presentation technology. It just makes it super simple to do that. We also talked about SQL Tracing. That is the ability to, SQL Tracing is where behind the scenes, the Alpha will track and record all of your interactions with the database. So if you're seeing something kind of not happening the way you want, or there's an issue, there's tools that are built in there that allow you to dive in and get a little more information as far as what's going on in the scenes. Now, I want to go through a quick demonstration. Now, this may be duplicative, what Sarah did, which I do appreciate, but I wanted to reiterate there's a new feature associated with the SQL tracing, which I didn't even know a few weeks ago. It just kind of popped on the radar there. that allows you not only SQL Trace and do it in a file format, which is what it is now, but also using SQL Tracing within the UX. So I'm going to show you a quick demonstration of that, how to set it up, what are the key aspects from there. And then I also want to talk a little bit more about Audit Trail. I don't think we really covered that, but I want to kind of cover that. It's a really powerful feature built into Alpha, specifically your project. And I wanted to spend a few minutes talking about that because, again, for people who are doing very specific solutions, often Audit Trail, say financial systems, medical systems, et cetera, is a key criteria. And this tool may save a lot of your time and energy to handle this stuff for you. So with that, I'm going to jump over and I want to talk about the SQL tracing first. So I'm going to jump in here and I'm going to go ahead and create a new UX. Now, this is a UX component capability, and I'll come back and show exactly how it's set up in a moment. But I'm just going to go ahead and go in here, and this is a new UX. I'm going to go ahead and add a list control. So we want to have a list control in here. And as it's been a while since I've done this, but I want to show you how easy it is to have Alpha take care of things for you. So I'm going to create a list control, tie it to the database because I want to show those capabilities. But I want Alpha to do most of the work for me. So I'm going to click here after putting in the name of the new control here. I'm going to click here for list control quick setup genie. This brings up a wizard interface. I select my connection string. I select how I'm going to extract data from the database. In this case, fields from a table, and I'll go to customers. So go ahead and just pick a few of these here. I could set filter order, etc. I'm not going to do any of that now, but that makes it even more powerful for filtering and handling those pieces there. But I want to include a detail view. So I've basically gone through a real quick presentation on how to set up a list control. What's neat about this is that Alpha does all the work to write all the connection to your database, to lay out the controls and everything else. So it takes what's normally like a 30-minute job, makes it into a few minutes, and handles all the complexity for you. So you'll see it created a list, it created a container. In that container, it created some text boxes and buttons that are already set up to interact with the data. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. So I've got my control here saved. One other thing I want to do is go ahead as it renders it for the first time, and I want to make sure I'm using a compact theme. So, oh, didn't like that. Oh, let's see, let's go ahead and do this. Come on, there we go. So as you can see, we have all that information. Basically this has done all the work where you'll notice that it's called the database, it's brought back the fields that I care about, it's populated all that information, and you'll notice it did two other things. One is it created a form for me tied to the fields, and as I touch and click on rows in this database up here, it automatically updates it right here, and you'll see it puts in buttons here. So I can go into here and just change this, hit save, synchronize, and it's done all the work to connect that back to the database and do those pieces there. As you can see, it handles all of that for me, which is very, very, very nice. So that basically is the wizard. But now let's say something's kind of acting a little wonky and you want to kind of look at behind the scenes of how Alpha is interacting with the information in the database. Again, we've spoken before. The first step is always go to Tools, Alpha DAO Connection Strings. And I've already created my demo one here. Let's go ahead and edit it. And there is a button here called Trace SQL. If you turn that on, then it's going to automatically write a file out with your transaction information. And the benefit of that is obviously then you can go in detail. Now, again, it works great. We demonstrated it before. The issue is that you kind of have to go on the field, onto finding the actual trace file, open it up, review it. Maybe a little more problematic if it's up on a server or an Alpha cloud. So there's this new feature, and again, I hope people be patient who've seen this before, but I can go ahead and extend this capability now with a new feature. So I go back into my UX here, and I want to track what's going on from the matter of what's going on in my database. So I'm going to do two things. One, first and foremost, I'm going to go into properties, and I'm going to type SQL and look for SQL. You'll notice when you're in the properties pane, you just click this little button here, and it allows you to find what you're looking for. And there's a new feature here called Capture SQL Trace Log. And it's got a little help, but basically this allows you now to basically capture that SQL information in the UX instead of having to go to a flat file and do other things there. Now to see that information, this turns on the functionality to handle that. To actually see that, we go to the controls, and I'm going to go ahead and go here and add a new control. And again, I'm going to use the shortcut by clicking Add Control here. And you'll notice we have a new control called SQL Trace Log. And so the beauty of this puts in a pre-made little item on your user interface. You associate that along with turning on the properties, and you now have the ability to do that SQL tracing without having to go out to an external file and do the other aspects there. So now if I go into my working preview, you're going to notice, oh, it did take my, just had to save that there. You'll notice now that I have a new little button here called Show Hide. Actually, you know what? I want to go back in there. I want to put that below the container because I want it kind of isolated from the rest of the information on the screen. So I just move that down outside of this container. I go in there and you'll see everything works the same. I have that little button down here. Let's go ahead and change this contact name and click Save, Synchronize. And now I can see, which is very cool, right here on the screen, it is going to tell me what the last, interaction was with the database. And I can see exactly what it is doing in the system and review that trace and see what's going on here. So you can see this was a refresh, and here we have a update statement, update. It tells you what the actual command was, i.e. what the SQL is that it submitted to the database. You'll also notice it added the argument. So when I changed Mr. Frederick's name from the old to new, it showed me the old and the new. And if there are any errors or anything else that would happen, it would show up right here. And again, when you're in a situation where, let's say you're on Alpha Cloud or something else, it just makes it much quicker to go in and look at that trace information without having to go through a whole big rigmarole to go find the file, download it, edit it, review it, etc. from there. And it's very simple. All you need to do is turn on that SQL trace on the UX. You need to add this control in, which is really the visualization of that data. And then from then on, you're golden and ready to go. And it really is a nice feature. I really like it, especially since I'm doing more and more of my work on Alpha Cloud. And if you haven't taken time to investigate and work with Alpha Cloud and check it out, it's definitely worth your while. It takes an enormous amount of DevOps stuff off of your plate so you can focus on what's really valuable, which is building your solution and supporting your customers and enhancing your overall value versus just managing servers and doing other things along those lines. So that is the new feature. And again, thank you very much, Sarah, for that introduction before. And I hope this expands it a little bit more, just make sure everybody can understand what's going on here. And as you can see, it gives you a very detailed history of what happened, how did it go, what went on, and really easy to read. So if you all of a sudden are seeing some weird things where you're getting database errors or the database data is not being written, you're going to be in pretty good shape from that standpoint there. I did want to mention one other thing, and actually I'm going to need your help, Dave. Dave was actually helping another associate of ours debug kind of a strange situation where every once in a while, when they were using the list control and everything else, when the updates would occur, it would throw an error, and it kind of seemed kind of not consistent. So it's like, well, how do I look into that? And so what I wanted to show, and Dave, if you can guide me here, is that if we go into the list control here, and we've set this all up into there, if we go to the detail view, you'll see a whole bunch of server-side events that are available. You also see things like debugging information. If you click on there, this allows you to do somewhat very similar with the list control, i.e. you can have a placeholder on your screen, and this will show the debugging information, which will show the SQL statements. Because again, the list control takes care of all that stuff for you. You basically point it to the right table in the fields. It takes care of managing the data offline and then synchronizes the data. But during that synchronization process, it's using SQL to interact with the database and read and write that data there. So this allows you to put that in here. And what's really nice about that is that, again, much like what I showed you a few minutes ago in terms of that trace, you get to see a lot of the little details behind the scenes, and it may give you some more information in regards to what is causing the problem. And it's very, very handy. And again, that's in the list control on the detail view to be able to enable that. Dave, are there any other nuances or things I mentioned you had mentioned about that feature?
Right. There is an error handler, I believe, for the for having an error event with SQL. You might search for it in the properties here,
Let's see where
or maybe that's not in list. Maybe it's in
maybe it's on a different. You know what? Maybe it's on the table properties. There it is. I think it's that one right there.
on SQL execute, right? So if you go ahead
Yeah.
and you tap on that smart field over there on the right, there's three dots.
Okay.
You can build out a function. The thing about this function, though, is it's a little limited in what it'll tell you. It'll tell you whether you were doing what operation you were doing, whether it was an insert or a delete or an update. But what it doesn't give you back is the full query that you were and the arguments that you were using along with that query. However, it will. As of tomorrow's pre-release build, that is going to be a feature that will be available to you on the on-SQL execute error event. And that would be pretty cool because you can then look up and have it perform an event, maybe send you off a log or write something to a log only when SQL has failed, which is considerably more efficient than logging every single SQL action. In fact, there was another question that someone had asked earlier, which was, how does this impact performance? And if you do use the SQL trace log, it can impact it quite a lot. I mean, it might still be usable, but it can really slow you down. So ideally, it would be great to know only when it failed what happened, and that's where this is gonna come to play. So that's it's in the code now. It's supposed to be in tomorrow's pre-release.
Yep. And again, where to find that, I went a little quick, is that if you go to the detail view and then go into the table properties, it's in this area. This is where we say things like, how is it going to interact with the table, a little more detail, things like geocoding, et cetera. So that's where you find from there. And again, we cover these things, but to be honest, they're really corner cases. I mean, I've found the list control is incredibly solid. I've found very reliable operation for the synchronization and the interaction with the backend. A lot of thought went into it, and it's really been hardened over the last couple of years. So this is kind of like, hopefully you'll never have to use this situation or use these tools. But if you do, they're there. We want you to be able to quickly identify what's going on and do from there. And in fact, while we're on this topic, I just ran into this yesterday where I was developing something on my local machine and it was working great. It was just doing fabulous, meaning I was in the development environment. Then I published it and then I started seeing basically 500 errors, server errors, and they were very kind of nondescript. So all I had to do was go into, and again, you remember in the development environment, when you publish locally, basically you're using the development environment as a server, a local server on your machine. So if we go to the web control panel, go to web development server. This is where you manage how that developer server works, like things, for instance, server port, what folder it's publishing in. This is essentially similar to the standalone alpha server, but it's built in and operates. It has certain limitations in terms of how many users and things like that. It's meant for development purposes there. But if I go to logging, you can enable server logging and note where these are. So I was getting an error. So what I did is I said, great. I said, enable server logging. Then I went ahead and I captured that error. And then I looked where this log was because it writes the log out there. And there was a little log file and I went in and it gave me more details. In the web, it just said server 500 error and didn't really give me much details. But I went in and actually looked at the log itself in the server error log, and I was able to find out very quickly, and I had seen that error before in certain situations. So boom, I knew exactly how to solve it. But it saved me a lot of time and frustration versus doing a lot of trial and error because I was able to quickly just go in, enable the server logging. I have to save and restart this so that it does it. And then if you don't need it, you can just remove it and get rid of it from there. And then you can go into the server log, and this is where it's located at. You can either click here. Once this is set up, you click open log, and it opens up. You can do things like rotate the logs as they get big, up to you. But I just want to show that sometimes, when things go a little different, not really going your way, there's a ton of server logging and a lot of features in there that allow you to trap what's going on behind the scenes. And again, our goal is not to have to do that much. I mean, it should just work and go there. But sometimes when you're doing a little more complex activities, you're going to run into these kind of situations, and this is where you'll go from there. There are other logging, things like raw HTTP. I rarely use that one. That's usually something really strange that I'm debugging with the development team or something like that, where they're seeing like a strange web browser error or things along those lines. This one, always you want the XBasic error log. So if anything happens in your XBasic code, and this is especially valuable on the server, it shows you what's going on there. Requested page, don't do much like that. And again, these logs can be automatically rotated, so you don't have to worry about all of a sudden this file getting too big and the system shutting down. It handles those pieces. And again, where I got that was go to web development server. This is where you can manage everything about your development server. Go to logging, and this is where you would enable it and be able to capture that information. And again, this has a default directory where it sends this information, but you can go elsewhere if you want to do from there. So I do want to move on to talk a little bit more about the audit trail functionality since we're on the SQL database capabilities. But before I do that, are there any questions on what we've talked about or what I've shown there? Or
not directly related to that. We do have questions, but we'll get to them in a bit.
Okay, yeah, we'll definitely be getting to those for sure. I want to make sure people know what's going on there. So let me get this organized. Okay, so one of the coolest features that was added a while back was the audit trail feature. And this is really, again, handy for people who want to make sure they have a good audit trail of what happens with their data. There are more advanced audit trail functions, like if you go into a UX control and you go to the server side events after dialog validate. In here, you can write your own code and do other things to review exactly what happened on that UX, what the data was before and after, etc. Very handy, but again, kind of code intensive, makes you have to do a lot of the heavy lifting there. And people did that because they needed the ability to do very detailed audit logs. But this came along and made that work a lot easier. So let's go ahead and demonstrate how that works. So I'm going to go ahead and first, just for to make this quick, I want to go ahead and create a grid component on my customers. And I'm going to use this for our demonstration. So query, Northwinds, customers. And I'm just going to do a straight up, get the fields, add these. And I'm going to make these editable here. I don't want customer ID, that's the primary key, and saved it. So go customer underscore grid. Okay. So, boom, I can start using this, doing edits and other pieces like that directly into it. Now, behind the scenes, you could use SQL Tracing to trace all the activity. If I have that enabled, then the tracing is going to happen behind the scenes. I can go and open up a log file and it'll go off to the races from there. This is just taking a moment to show the screen. So bear with me a second. Come on. I think I was jumping around too much. There it is. So I've got an editable, I can insert new records, I could put other information in it, all those good to go from there. So again, in this situation, I have server-side events, and I could go to after, I could go to, for instance, I think it's after, let's see, after update record, I could write my own little code there. After insert record, I could write my own little code. You'll see that it gives you all the information that came back from the grid, dirty fields, what are they, etc. So you have everything you need to do from there. But again, takes a little while. And again, you need a little more control, but definitely a lot more work from there. So if we just go to the Web Projects Control Panel and go to the Project Properties. So again, I'm back at the Web Projects Control Panel, go to Project Properties. And then in here, I'm going to scroll down till I see an area here called Audit Table for SQL tables. And again, this is meant for SQL-based solutions from there. So this is saying, oh, there's a built-in feature that says keep track of edits of tables made through grid and UX components. So if you have grids which are data bound and UXs that are data bound, then you can go in and make these edits, right? Or you can have the system track these edits for you. So it's going to ask you a few things. This is very similar to like the repository table where you can have a scratchpad table that you can use within the system. So I'm going to go to the connection string. I'm going to say I want to go ahead and use my Northwinds. Now, interesting enough, there's a table that we need to have that's going to store all this information. So I could go ahead and manually create that, but one of the things that's nice is there's a built-in create audit trail feature where all I have to do is say create audit trail. Now, again, here you'll see this is the details of what are the fields that are required. So that table has to have a certain set of fields that are required. So you could create it yourself, or what I like to do is have Alpha do the work for me. Oh, we'll go ahead and I'll call this audit trail. You can call it anything you want. I'm going to go ahead and create the audit table. And you'll see it's created and it's filled in the mapping between the table fields and the fields that we expect in the system here. Very nice, very easy. And so now there's a new table in my database that is set up and ready to go with that audit trail information. And again, if you don't like that, you can modify it, but you'll just have to map your new field names, et cetera, from the database to this situation from here. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about user ID stuff in a moment here. So it's not showing here, but we do have a field map here. Okay, now I'm going to come back to this in a few moments, but let's go ahead and we've got our customer grid and I could go and run that, but how do I see what's happening? So I'm going to go ahead and go back into Web Projects Control Panel, click New. I'm going to create a new grid here and I'm going to click OK. And I'm going to do my query. In this case, I'm going to go to my Northwinds and I'm going to select Audit Trail. Notice I have that new table that Alpha created for me in the system. Select that and I'm going to go to my fields. These are the standard fields that are in there. And I just want to read only, so I'll go ahead and save this as Audit Trail Grid. Okay. Save that. Let's do a working preview. And you'll see there's no data in there yet, so we have no records in there. So let's go into our customer grid. Let's run that. Now that everything's been enabled, go ahead and go here to Mr. Frederic. Go ahead and save that. Now again, because I still have my SQL trace, it's going to trace that information. But now, since I also have this, I go into my working preview here, you're going to see that Alpha automatically wrote a record into that audit trail table with all the information I need. Done. Simple. You'll see that it was an update command. We'll talk about user ID, puts in the time date stamp, puts in the data that was sent in there so we can see exactly what data, the old data and the new data. So you can see that the contact name was changed from this with a 1 to there. Tells me what database table, primary key value, and the connection string to the database. So we know exactly where, you could have multiple connection strings with multiple different audit trails, et cetera. You can do all that within a single table. And what's nice is then you could go in and say, okay, I want to see all the changes to a record blonde P in the customer ID table. You could just use standard searching, sorting kind of capabilities built into the system from there. And this handles both updates, inserts, deletes, all that is handled within the system. And this works for both customers in the grid, or well, any table, excuse me, but also in UXs. If I have a data-bound UX and I do this, it's going to automatically behind the scenes at the project level monitor that information for me. It's very, as you can see, it only took me a few minutes to set up. You can customize it and tweak it as you see fit, but it's really, really straightforward. Now, one thing I did want to show, which is very incredible and really critical, is user ID, because often one of the primary reasons for your audit trail is to understand who is the individual who did the actual modification. So as you can see, it's unknown currently from there. So if we go back into the Web Project Control Panel, go to Project Properties, scroll down to the audit table, you'll notice that there is an expression for user ID. So this is what you can use to basically tell the system, how do I find out who the user ID is? And often you've stored that in a session variable or something along those lines here. And you can see the user ID of the user is made to the edit is obtained from the security system. Now, obviously, my security system is not enabled on this little project. That's why it's unknown, but it handles there from there. So I click on this. You can see is if I had the security system invoked, it would just use the security framework to get the user ID, meaning that it would automatically take care of inserting whoever the current logged in is user. So you don't have to track that and put those in pieces from there. And it gives you a little background of there. So if we go there, then it's also got an expression to say how you want to evaluate it. So this is the default. And if you have security enabled, it just handles it. But you could also, if you've been using a different session variable or something else, like a legacy system you want to retrofit, you can put in your own expression here. And what happens is whenever it goes to insert the data into that audit trail, it takes a moment, figures out who the user is, and inserts that data with it into the security system. Very much similar to the extended user ID, where it basically you have a table along with repository, et cetera, to get that information. It just handles those things for you. And if you just need a basic audit trail ready to go, you can enable this, and within a matter of a few minutes, you're going to have an audit trail in your application, and then you can do anything you want from there. Now, one thing I want to kind of highlight before I stop on this is one other key question is, well, okay, so this is built to track grid and UX components, which is great. That's where the bulk of your effort is going to be. But if you are building more advanced systems, the reality is you will be using your own Alpha X Basic. So you may want to have the ability to have that audit trail occur with, oh, that's the old audit trail. So, is this the old stuff here? Yeah, that's old stuff. But it basically allows you to create a custom connection string that will allow you to audit that there. So what you do is, you know, with the UX and the grid component, those take care of saying, oh, I have an audit. The project needs me. I have my own code. I'm going to take care of that for you. But when you're writing XBasic, maybe you're writing updates into the database and stuff like that. What you can do, which is really cool, is you can create your own custom connection type that will then kind of like act in the middle to intercept your commands that go to the database and accept, you know, and then record that same data. So I'm not going to go into details on how this works, other than I want you to know that if you're doing audit trails, you can either do that in the username or password. I'm sorry, not username, password. You can do that in the UX and grid component automatically, and you can also use this technique that in your XBasic code, you can actually have ways you can also trap that audit event, so you can also have that data stored alongside of the data that was stored during the UX events and the grid events from there. And let me go ahead and grab this real quick, and I'm going to put that into the chat box. So if you have any questions, you can go look at there. And
where did you copy that URL from?
Oh man, I am out. That tells you how bad I am. I'm like out of.
I know, you know, it's coming up on summer. We're all feeling that. Yeah.
I know.
Always grab it from here. That's permalink.
Yeah. Permalink.
Permalink.
Much better. Much better.
Thanks, Dion.
Permalink. It's like if you have a perm from the 70s, it makes your hair really curly.
Permakink.
Awesome. So that kind of is what I want to kind of wrap up real quick, and I want to open it for questions. But as you can see, there's a huge amount of capability built into the tool to handle obviously SQL databases, but also to track activity, you know, trace things, do audit trails. All that's built into the system, so you don't have to spend time developing your own code. You can, but this allows you to do that stuff pretty straightforward.
Awesome. Thank you, Dan.
Yeah,
so you have a
my
question
pleasure.
here saying, can you create an audit trail for only a specific UX or grid components within a project, but maybe not for all of them?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think it's kind of an all or nothing at the project level. You're right. It may be a situation where it could create a pretty big table over time, although big tables are easy to handle these days. But I think it's on the project level, so I don't think there's any override that I'm aware of.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Well, so Just to pipe in on that
Oh.
one, if you use a connection string to do the auditing, which we have an audit trail as a type of connection string, then you could set that up for some of your grids and then use your regular connection string for everything else.
Ah, good point. Yep.
Sure could. Yeah.
There you go. The big brain.
Yep.
Much bigger than mine.
Excellent. Let me see what else I've got here for questions on this. Bunch of questions, but not all on this one. I guess you explained it clearly.
No, good.
Someone
I'm
asked,
glad.
is logging available for grid components? But that was asked earlier on, because I know you just did a demonstration of that. Someone pointed out, if you have multiple app server instances, can you log in different locations? I believe you can.
You probably have to go along the trail that Sarah talked about in terms of a custom connection string and use different connection strings for your different environments.
Great. Okay, next up. Next question we have unrelated. Do we have any update on the reset password by the user stuff that I was showing before? The answer is yes, I do. I will paste the link for that into the chat window. I have a GitHub repository set up. And so if you need that, it's there. It'll help you set up your security system in a way that's easier than what's out of the box. But what I have to tell you is what's coming out of the box is right now in flux, because we are about to make some really cool changes to our security system that will make it easier to manage lost passwords. For example, we'll have abilities to automatically send out emails. You won't even need your own Spark Post account or anything like that, which you would need with my solution. So I will post what I've got in chat, but it's not going to be very long before security has been updated, and it is going to be way easier to set up. It'll set up link tables for you. It's going to be awesome. Yeah, exactly. So it's all part of trying to make the whole thing easier.
Very cool.
What else we've got here for questions? Let me just make a note to paste that into chat. Here's a question. How can I get a child list to refresh when the search filter is cleared on the parent list?
Yeah,
using your twins as an example.
Yeah, so this is a situation where, let me go ahead and see if I can UX here. Bear with me. So I'm just going to go in here and add a quick list control. Actually, you know what, before I do that, I should have had this demo ready to go. So let's go to container, do a panel layout. Let's see, panels. Panel layout, add one in there. Panel card after, 2 of them, not 22. And so let's go ahead and go here, put a list control. And I'll go ahead and put in customers here. And I'll just do this very quickly, kind of using the query or the wizard I said before. That's better. Okay. And let's go ahead and add a detail view just so we have everything in there. Okay, so I have a parent control called customers. I'll go parent. So I want to go ahead and add a, and this is probably, but it kind of gives you people an idea of how this handles here. So I'm going to put in another list. In this case, I'm going to go orders. Going to use the same concept of a connection string. And we'll go to the orders table, field list. Okay. And very important, you'll notice that there is down here a parent list function. So it noticed that, oh, you know what, you have a parent or another list on there. So I notice you have a parent list. So are these related? And I go, yes, they are. So now I'm going to say the parent list ID is customers, and the linking field in the parent list is customer ID, and the linking field in this is customer ID. Again, a foreign key concept from there. So I'm going to click OK. So I'm going to save that. Let's check this out and make sure it works. And this is just kind of an introduction to parent-child things there. So as you can see, now that I've set up a parent-child, when I click on a row, it just immediately refreshes my orders here. Now, the question is, let's say you've gone in and filtered something on like the child list. And when you select here, you want to remove the filter on that child list so that you get back to kind of like the full picture of what the parent child has. Well, the way you can approach that is by using a JavaScript action. So I'm going to go in here to JavaScript actions, and I'm going to call this clear filter. Okay, I'm going to open up that, and I'm going to add an action JavaScript, and I'm going to find it. I'm going to do a list control action. So there's a whole series of list control actions that are available within the system. So I'm going to look at the list here, and you can see there's refresh data here, etc. And I believe, which one is it here? Let's see. I think, oh wait, maybe it's not in this one. Wait a second here. Where is it? I thought there was a populate shift. Okay, filter, list ID, orders. But see, this is doing a filter here. So actually the other method I use, sorry about that, is that you can actually go into here and you can use a built-in JavaScript command. So I'll go ahead and filter. And so we can sit there and we can say list object clear search list. This is if there's a list with a detail, it removes the list filter. There's also clear search list, which allows you to remove the list filter. So that's the one I wanted there. So I'll copy that. I'll insert it here. Now notice I want to make sure that I have this list control right here. So I'm going to select that, point it to the correct one, orders. And so now when this is emitted, it's going to run that little piece of JavaScript and clear the list there. Now, the benefit of that is now that I have that action JavaScript, I can now call that action JavaScript anywhere. I mean, I didn't have to use action JavaScript. I tend to like to, because if I have to go in and do like multiple steps, I just go to this one spot, but I just have to run this. And so let's say you have a situation where I have a button up here and I do something up here in this customer thing, and I can just add into that saying, oh, okay, clear the other list filter, and boom, that other, all the filters. And if I have multiple child items or lists, I can do them from there. So again, you can look into, and I apologize I misled you there, is that in here you can look for the clear function, and there's a number of different ones. There's clear search list, etc. You can also use the list object set filter, and you can set the filter to be basically anything, and it will basically remove any existing filters on there. So this is what you would use in terms of ability to trigger after you've done some other action to return your list back to a sort of known state where it's showing everything you need. And then subsequently, then filters can then be reapplied to those lists to see what the information is from there. So that is my direction. I kind of went a little deep, but I wanted to show this powerful parent-child capability built into the system because it really saves you an enormous amount of effort in terms of setting these things up and allows you to do that parent-child. And it's smart enough that if this order has like an insert function, it's smart enough to set whatever the current primary key is from those pieces there.
Excellent. Here's a question about the Alpha Update Installer, and that is, does the Alpha Universal Installer, does the Alpha Universal Installer also install hotfixes? I don't know if it does.
The answer is no. I'm not aware of it installing. Hotfixes have a very specific step-by-step process that need to be done on the server. So I don't think it's been envisioned to have that ability within the universal installer. Be a good enhancement request, which is help, send an enhancement request, and send that into our team so it's on our radar.
Very cool.
No, this is the part where Sarah comes in and says, I'm wrong. I'm waiting. It's coming. Come on.
You must
Don't wait
right.
too long. Don't make me wait.
You must be right.
Slap down.
Well, actually, you're right.
Oh.
Oh, well, a blind, was it the blind squirrel will find a nut every once in a while.
In a forest, maybe, yeah.
Yeah, I know, with like a pointer and a sign or like, you know.
No,
Perhaps-
hotfixes
Yes,
are
it's
currently not handled by the universal installer.
Yeah.
And they're kind of very rare animals that, unless it's something, that it's just not, we'd
Usually
rather
we do
work
a
with
proper update.
releases and things like
Yeah,
that.
exactly. How would you go about building a web app that had single sign-on for multiple other web apps that could be loaded from a button on the main page?
So I have gone down that road, and what is important is, and this is why when I usually set up my projects, when I go to Tools, Alpha DAO Connection Strings, I create 2 connection strings, one for my primary database, the second connection string that is pointed to my security database. And it may be the same database when you start, but this gives you the ability down the road to actually have a separate database to be able to point to for your security application. So each of your applications could have a separate primary database, but then the secondary connection string, which is what you will use to set up your security, i.e. you have to tell the security system, here's the connection string you need to use to go talk to security database. Then you can have multiple apps calling the same database with the same content. Now, a couple caveats, very, very important, is when you set up your security, make sure it's consistent with each of your apps. Most importantly is that the password encryption key built into the security is the same. Otherwise, one app will say, oh, this is how I decrypt the password. The other one will go there and nothing will work properly. Only one will be able to log in from there. Now, what's kind of neat is that if you move to Alpha Cloud or IIS, you can set up in your publishing profile and use they're called storage instead of security database. It's called security storage. You can point multiple web apps running on, say, Alpha Cloud to the same security storage, which allows you to manage all that data in one spot for multiple apps, which is really, really handy there. So again, you can have multiple web apps, but I would highly recommend you set up a dedicated connection string in each of your apps that are used only for security, and that you're very careful when you set up security for each of your apps, they are consistent, because if they aren't, you could get weird stuff happening from that standpoint there. And I've done that before. The question becomes like, where do you do the master of adding people and stuff like that? How do you make sure there's uniqueness? There's a few other little nuances, but it's really not too hard. And it's really just, all you're really doing is having multiple apps point to a single database and a single set of database tables for the security information to support all those web apps.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Okay, a different question. This one has to do with file upload. The question is, would you be able to show an example of an application or XBasic code which uses the e.target.filename variable to set or change the name of a file in the file upload on stored file name compute XBasic function? So they might add in there, this is my document, whatever, and you may want to change it to document 1273 on the way through.
Yep. Let me see if I have an example of that there real quick.
Okay.
Let's see. Oh, I think it's under other controls. It's drag and drop. Okay. So one of the neat features is the drag and drop upload, which was added a little while ago, which puts a little drag area on your web page. You can just drag files onto it or click it to upload it from there. And in here, you can set up like what it looks like, etc. And then in here on the file upload properties, this is where you're set up all those there. Now, I'm not sure if I'm answering the question correctly, but when I set this up, I connected in this case to S3 or Alpha Anywhere. So I can connect it either to the server, and thus I'm using a folder on the server, or to S3, which is really nice. If I use S3, you're going to notice there's something here called target object name on S3. And this is basically a little, is JavaScript. So what happens is we're going to take care of all the, when someone drops a file on there, it's going to automatically take care of all the stuff for you, but it's going to trigger and you'll see this information down here, a function which allows you to get out of that. Let me go ahead and do this right here. You can then say, oh, what is the current file name? You can change that so that when it gets uploaded on S3, it has a different name. But this is done in JavaScript. So it's done client side, which is a different animal than a lot of other pieces. So you have to kind of think ahead, is that you'll have this little JavaScript that will rename the file that goes on from there. Now, that said, after the upload is completed, you have a ability to run an XBasic command or function that allows you to do post-processing. So for instance, you could go in and update some other tables or things along those lines. So the reality is you may just want to give them a generic one on the target object name. And then in your app on upload complete, you could walk through all of those just uploaded information and update the file names, other information associated with it. If I select Alpha Anywhere, you'll notice that here, I think, where is it? Yeah, again, you have the on upload complete all files. It gives you a list of all the files and the information that's associated with it. And actually, let me go ahead and let's see, that is there. Oh yeah, you'll see that it has e-file array. That's where you can get the data. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question correctly, but the system does give you the ability to modify the file name information before it's uploaded. And you can also take the, and write your own XBasic to modify it after it's been uploaded to the server.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Oh, and wait, I'm sorry. One last thing I want to do.
Yeah.
Notice this XBasic function when I'm on Alpha Anywhere. So I've got S3. This pretty much handles everything for you, meaning it's just going to grab your stuff, putting it up on it. So we handle a lot of those. But if you're using here, then you have a XBasic function. We'll call it process files. And you'll see, let's see, show function prototype. You'll see in here, this allows you when you process it. And again, this is after it's been uploaded to the server, but in here you could go through and review those file names, and then you have all the access to everything going on. You could actually literally use XBasic to rename those files. Now, again, this is sort of if you're using your own server, if you're using Alpha Cloud and stuff like that, you're probably using cloud storage, different ways to approach those pieces from there. So.
Awesome. Digging here through some more questions. Just out of curiosity, did someone who normally gets an email reminder link for today's webinar, did that not show up today? Got a couple of reports that maybe there's something broken with our mailing system. So if you could let us know, that would be great. Here's a question, sort of a formatting question. This person would like to put a UX, and they call it a driver UX. I'm guessing that this is a UX within a UX. And they want that UX within a UX to take over the whole browser page, centered both vertically and horizontally. How would they go about doing that?
Okay, so let me make sure I understand. So they have a UX control, and they want to launch a new UX?
UX within a UX, yep.
Okay. Well, first, if you're doing anything on a UX, if it opens up in a browser, the UX is going to take over the whole browser. So step number one is I can use a panel card in here. Go ahead and do a panel card. Okay. And if I now, let's go ahead and just do a test of it, open it up. Nope, got to start my server, excuse me. Try it one more time. So when you open up a UX in a browser, it basically takes over the whole browser window and it lays things out within there. So if you want this centered, one option you can use is inside your panel card, you could put in a container, and that container could be, say, an alignment container. And that alignment container allows you to align things left, center, or right, and middle. And so, so let's go ahead and make that 100%. Okay, let's save that and give that another. So again, the idea is you can use alignment within the panel card to align things on the screen. So, and if this worked correctly, and we'll see in a few moments, we should see our file upload piece in the middle of the screen and in the middle. And so now all of my content that's within this alignment screen is nicely aligned there. It doesn't matter where the UX is. The UX is just going to take that, to present the panel card. The panel card is going to take this whole area, and now you have that area. So I would just say research on when you're building your UX to try and use alignment containers, which are very handy to use to set these up here. One other cool container that I haven't played a lot with, but I know it's a nice one, is a type of one is called, isn't it called the Flex Layout? I think is that what it's called, that uses some CSS tricks to make things look really nice. So there's a number of different ways that you can, the alignment is just pretty straightforward, center, left, right, how do I want it aligned on the page? With Flex Layout, you can apply some more CSS capabilities to make things flow in a very nice direction, because it's really just using CSS behind the screens to lay out that information within that container. So I hope that gives you a point. So when you open that UX, put the alignment thing in there inside of a panel card. The panel card will grow to grab the complete screen, and then the container will say, oh, okay, I'm 100%, I'm going to do the stuff from within inside there and align it properly on my screen.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan. Okay, so next question. Someone says, this is a troubleshooting question. Every so often, my UX displays a global error along with a string of the error, but I can't always see to the end of it. It gets cut off. Is there a way to expand that error window so that Alpha displays it?
I have seen that too. Yeah, and it's really like, kill me. So what I normally do is in those situations, let's say I'm going in here on dialog initialize. I make sure first I use an on error environment. Let me go find it real quick. Okay, so I use the on error around when I'm doing those pieces there. And therefore, if I have any XBasic code, I can trap it, and then I send that to the trace window. But more importantly is, remember when I mentioned before, is that if you're using on your server, if you've enabled on the logging, enable server logging and XBasic error logging, you can go look at those logs and that same error will be there. Now, so if it's like an XBasic command that goes bad, it's going to write that in there. And then you don't have to worry about just seeing the small amount of data there. So that's kind of frustrating. The other is that if you're in development, you can obviously put a debug, and when that error occurs, stop and look at the error, and you can actually see the full error. But I've seen the same thing where the actual message that pops up in the browser is very, it doesn't let you see the whole thing. Thus, you need to kind of either send it to the trace file or set up logging and go in and see the log file from there. That's probably your best kind of way to approach getting the details on there. So.
Excellent. Looking through for questions that we can get to today, since we're limited in time. Let's see if we can find one more. Anyway, it looks like a lot of people did get their emails. And
Good.
One person, we tried to answer the question, didn't quite answer it. So I would like to remind everyone, please send your emails to guides, GUIDES @alphasoftware.com. We'd be happy to take a look at issues that you are having. That's what we're for.
Before we go, can I mention something?
Go for it.
Yeah.
All right. I just want to remind everyone who's running Windows 8 or, well, let me look it up. Windows 8.1, Windows Server 2012 R2, support for those operating systems ends on July 1st this year. So if you want to keep up to date with Alpha Anywhere, we strongly encourage you to upgrade before that to make sure your apps continue to work.
When are they going to end of life Windows Me? Because I'm my favorite by far, and so I really don't want to give up Windows Me.
It's not even on the list, so
so it's good. So if it's not on the list, it's still supported. It's not end of life.
No, absolutely not.
Windows 3.1, same deal. Yeah, exactly.
No, anything older than Windows XP or even 8.1, we're not supporting anymore. So I just want to make sure everybody is aware of that. I know some people may still be running that, and all that really means is that we're not testing on those platforms anymore. So moving forward, Alpha Anywhere may not function as expected. So we
So-
really need you to upgrade.
Right. So if you find what looks like a bug and we test it out in the newer environment and we can't reproduce it, you're not going to go back. We're not going to go back to an older operating system. So keep your stuff up to date. It's good for security anyway.
There's a little message said SOL.
Not sure what that stands for.
No, I don't know either. I just heard it's funny. So
Sarah, thanks very much.
thank
Dion,
you,
thank
Sarah.
you very
Appreciate
much.
that.
We've come to the end of our time. Thanks everyone for showing up and asking questions. You know where to send your questions if you have any more. We look forward to seeing you at our next Wednesday webinar. Until then, take care and stay well. Bye-bye.